There is an interesting statement that sort of sums up what I want you to understand, written by Dr. Jerome Lejeune, professor of fundamental genetics in Paris, because I think it's important for you to have this information. Let me quote him. And he's not writing as a Christian, he's writing as a scientist in the area of genetics. He says, life has a very long history, but each individual has a very neat beginning, the moment of its conception. The material link is the molecular thread of DNA. In each reproductive cell, this ribbon, roughly 1 meter long, is cut into pieces, 23, or chromosomes. As soon as the 23 paternally derived chromosomes are united through fertilization to the 23 maternal ones, the full genetic meeting necessary to express all the inborn qualities of the new individual is gathered, and personal constitution takes place. At 2 months of age, the human being is less than 1 thumb length from the head to the rump. He would fit at ease in a nutshell, but everything is there: hands, feet, head, organs, brain. In the 4th week, there is consciousness. All are in place. His heart has been beating for a month. By the 2nd month, his fingerprints can be detected. His heart is beating 150 to 170 beats a minute. To accept the fact, he writes, that after fertilization has taken place, a new human being has come into being is no longer a matter of taste or opinion, end quote. It's a person. In our world, we're slaughtering between 50 and 60 million babies a year. In the United States, on record, is 1.5 million abortions a year. Every 3rd baby conceived is murdered in the womb. 4,000 a day, plus 170 an hour. Planned Parenthood alone kills 1 every 95 seconds. The Physicians Association of Planned Parenthood released this statement, quote, "Abortion is a treatment for unwanted pregnancy, the 2nd sexually transmitted disease. Our nation and others are murdering a whole generation of humans in mass infanticide that was legalized in January of 1973 by the Roe versus Wade decision made by an unrighteous group of people on the Supreme Court. Now, 43% of all women have an abortion, and 47% of abortions are repeats. Suicide rate among people who've had an abortion goes up between 400 and 800%. Many studies, starting in 1957, there have been about 30-some studies on the effect of having had an abortion on breast cancer. It greatly raises the risk. 27 out of about 35 studies indicate there's a significant increase in breast cancer risk for someone who has an abortion because it's such a terrible interruption of the normal cycle. Say nothing of depression, withdrawal, guilt, shame, alcohol dependency, etc., etc. How did we ever get here where we just massacre infants in the safest place, in the womb, where we literally go in there and kill them? Well, you just have to go back and understand that Satan is a murderer from the beginning, right? This is satanic. He is the father of lies, and he's the father of murder. He is the first murderer. He would have murdered God if he could have, deicide in heaven, and he was thrown out. And when he came down to earth, he moved Cain to kill Abel and unleashed on the world the whole array of murders that has characterized human existence. It goes on relentlessly. Satan particularly goes after babies. He did in Moses' day. He did in Jesus' day. He wanted to kill all the young children in Egypt because of the fear that a deliverer would come. He wanted to kill all of the 2-year-old and under babies in and around Jerusalem for fear that the king was coming. Satan is a murderer. All of this is reflective of satanic hatred of the purposes of God and the life that God creates. The Jews who were against abortion fell into idolatry, as you know, and began to take their born children and incinerate them on an altar to Molech, burning them as human sacrifices. That was the kind of sin that led to their destruction, their death, their judgment, and their captivity. brought their nation to an end. Psalm 127:3, behold, children are a gift from the Lord. In Psalm 104, verse 30, you send forth your spirit, they are created. In Ruth chapter 4, verse 13, Boaz took Ruth, she was his wife, and when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. We live because he gave us life. You're not an animal. You're not a biological accident. You're not tissue at some point and then you become a person. You're a creation of God, by God, who weaves together the genetic code, who intimately sees the unformed fetus, and who guides the entire process. Job understood this. You go back into the most primitive time in history, that's the time of Job, who lives at the time of the patriarchs. And he says in chapter 10, verse 8, your hands fashioned and made me altogether. He says, you made me like clay. You clothed me with skin and flesh. Verse 11, you knit me with bones and sinew. You granted me life. Your care preserved my spirit. You kept me alive in the womb. You put me all together. And you do remember the words of Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. I formed you in the womb, but before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. In the New Testament, in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, we learn that the Holy Spirit created Christ in the womb of Mary without a human father. Christ, when did Christ come into the world? Did he come into the world in his birth? Did Jesus come into the world in Bethlehem? No. Jesus came into the world in his conception. You say, well, what about a deformed baby? Are they a gift from the Lord? Listen to Exodus 4:11. The Lord said to him, to Moses, who made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? John chapter 9, Jesus actually said this man was born blind for the glory of God. People say, well, we can kill him if it was a rape, or we can kill him if it was incest, or we can kill them if they're defective. Really? No baby is a mistake. No baby is a sexual accident or biological accident. No baby is a pile of tissue. And no baby is part of the mother's body. It is a person created by God. Shall not murder. Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. Remember when Cain killed Abel, and the blood of Abel in the ground cried out to God for vengeance? You go through the Old Testament, you'll find Leviticus, Joshua, Samuel, Kings, Ezekiel, all kinds of comment about blood guiltiness, that the blood of those slaughtered cries out for vengeance from God. And that's the plight that this country's in. We're just another country like all the rest that have gone down this same path. This is blatant paganism at its most rank level, at its most base level. Headed for judgment in a sea of blood for the murder of babies, along with all the other perversions that go with it. And I don't think that anything shows more clearly the moral collapse of a society than the mass murder of little ones in the wombs of mothers. It's so horrific, it's hard to even comprehend.